what made you realize transgenderism is a threat to women's rights? This question is for Anna.
So I understood it through radical feminist theory, basically. I found it through an acquaintance who sent me a really good video presentation by Rachel Ivey. I don't know if you've heard, but I thought I was completely blown away because I already questioned it before because I thought that transgender, that I didn't understand how a man can become a woman. I just couldn't understand it, but I always thought that, they're part of the LGBT community, so I am just gonna, I probably just don't understand it. But then when I saw the video, I was just blown away. And from, first of all, the first time I really realized that it's a threat to women's rights, it's theoretically, like, you can't tell me that, a woman chooses to be oppressed. Like, to me, that's very insulting. And that's, like, first, theoretically, it's clearly against women. But then when I started following radical feminists on Twitter, and I saw that this is happening, like, in reality, that there's a material impact to this ideology, and that it's not just like a minority of people, and that now girls have to share changing room with males, or that the silencing of feminists and males competing against women in sports, and then just personal stories that I've heard of, girls, hating themselves so much or hating being lesbian so much that they would go to have these treatments and these irreversible treatments to be male because it's so hard for them to be women. And then what also is now angering me is the fact that women cannot really speak about their oppression anymore, that now we have to say people who have periods, people who have uteruses, or people will tell us that we're being transphobic and hateful. But if we can talk about our sex-based oppression, how are we supposed to fight for ourselves and for our liberation? So yeah, that's basically, all these things have shown me that trans ideology is against women.
Yeah, what made you realize transgenderism is a threat to women's rights? I was living with an old friend of mine, and I had somehow disassociated myself from feminism because before I used to hang out with some queer feminists, and somehow I felt that it was too much at some point. Like, it felt like I have to police my language all the time and be very careful with everything I do or say around them. So I had distanced myself from them. And then when I started to live with this friend of mine, at some point she started to talk about transgenderism. But then, yeah, she told me about Megan Murphy and, for example, this Jonathan Yaniv case. And then I started to read for myself and realized that, at least like what's going on in the UK and in Canada and the States, that it's not okay. And it's weird that the media is not talking about this more, that Finnish media is completely unaware of this or doesn't want to write about this.
My concern is that Bolivian women are losing the few safe space that we have to talk about such serious and important issues for us. By allowing self-identify men to have the full right to identify with whatever they please, we lose our space to talk about our own health, to be able to focus on strategies to prevent girls and women from dying, for being raped or become pregnant. We find it funny that when there are cases of rape of girls, there is not a trans group that joins us to demand their right to abortion. The same is true for women. They don't care about feminicide numbers because women never matter to them. Therefore, it is concerning that entities such UN Women Bolivia an international organization that should support the rights of women in Bolivia, invites men to public conversations about women's health and women within the media. After all, what can a man say about periods? What can a man say about abortion laws in rape case? What can a man speak about the experience of pregnancy, breastfeeding, or motherhood? This is Chantal Cuellar, a transidentified man. Next, please. This is Bruna Mora, a transidentified man, talking about women and health. Where's the women? Next, please. This is Leone Dorado, a transidentified man. Next, please. This is Carolina Herrera, not the fashion designer, another transidentified man. In addition, it is also appealing that we can no longer question prostitution because for these men, prostitution is now sex work. The promotion of such violence against women and girls, but also against other transidentified males, shows what this ideology really is about: racism, misogyny, and profit. We will never see rich white men in dresses in the streets. We will see the mestizos, poor and indigenous people exploited as always. We want to make it clear that we are not against these men having access to health services. Actually, it seems highly imperative that they have full access. Today can work on their own internal homophobia. What we need to highlight is that the rights of the transidentified population should not eliminate the few rights that women have achieved. These people have the right to live free of violence, which the patriarchal system imposed on them. But that does not mean that they must undermine what we have acquired through the years of political struggle.
This is a question now. We're going to go to Liane from Get the L Out. What made you realize transgenderism was a threat to women's rights?
Okay. Personally, I always knew. From a feminist perspective, we understand men as an oppressor class. We also have an analysis based on material reality. Trans women are males. It comes as no surprise that they behave like males. I have been an activist since the early 80s. The threat that males wanted to come into women's spaces was always there. As lesbian feminists, we knew this. Janice Raymond wrote about it as early as 1979. But then nobody expected we would find ourselves in the situation we are in today. When, for example, lesbians are the most hated group by refusing male partners. When I first heard about women who were leaving the trans cult and detransitioning, like the women who spoke at the Detrans Advocacy Network launch in Manchester, the issue became even more personal for me. Charlie said after the launch, Charlie Evans, who was one of the women, lesbian now, who organized this. We held a panel of 7 detrans women. Combined, we had 5 mastectomies, 2 hysterectomies, 2 ovarectomies, and 20 years of testosterone. We are all between 19 and 29 years old. We spoke to an audience of 200 about the most personal invasion of our rights. I knew I was a lesbian at a very young age. As a child or teenager, I never conformed to femininity. I was what other people would call a tomboy. I hate that word tomboy, but there we go. When I heard the transitioners' stories of self-hatred and their history of medical violence, I felt if I had been born today, it could have happened to me. Lots of lesbians my age feel the same way.
So now we're going to go to CE from Nigeria. What made you realize transgenderism is a threat to women's rights?
So for me, I think it's the Canadian situation. I can't remember the guy's name, the rape shelter that was threatened, and then they lost their funding. For me, that was just the last straw. I couldn't understand how some self on women who had already been traumatized. It just didn't make any sense to me. So for me, that was just the last straw. Then I started hearing about the sports cases in the United States, mediocre men competing with women in athletics and of course winning. That didn't seem fair to me either. And the Jessica Yaniv story, and then this whole thing of, someone mentioned this whole thing of sex work is work. And somehow the only people that seem to think it's so great are trans-identified men who are women that think that being sexually assaulted on a regular basis is work. So for me, those were the things that sort of pushed me in that direction.